Finally, studies on early postoperative dosing, like a 2021 study led by Dandis, highlight that people who have a foundation of strength and motor control tolerate early movement and progressive exercise more effectively. This doesn't mean prehab solves everything, but it supports the idea that a stronger, more coordinated system handles surgical stress more efficiently. Have I convinced you yet? Are you ready to get back to what you love after knee replacement? The Total Knee Success Podcast is your trusted guide with practical tips, evidence-based strategies, and no fluff. It's not personal medical advice, just solid education to help you manage pain, regain mobility, and get back to living the life you love. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Total Knee Success Podcast. I'm Michelle, and today we're taking a clear, grounded look at prehab, which is the work you do before knee replacement surgery to lift your baseline so you enter the early stages afterward with a stronger and more prepared starting point. Prehab isn't magic, and it doesn't rewrite everything about your long-term outcome, but the research shows that it can tighten the curve early on and help you enter surgery with steadier footing. Prehab can be defined in a few different ways depending on who is delivering it. In the broader literature, it's described as preparation across several domains: physical conditioning, mental readiness, and sometimes even nutritional or lifestyle adjustments. For this episode, I'm focusing on the physical pillar because that's the part I treat and the part with the clearest evidence for early postoperative benefit. I'll be writing a book on prehab that will cover the broader definition in detail, and we'll include the research supporting each category. But here we're staying grounded in the physical work that directly shapes the first steps after surgery. Over my years in the clinic, I've seen a steady rise in orthopedic surgeons sending people to me for prehab before surgery. What's striking is that most of the people who arrive weren't seeking prehab on their own. They come because their surgeon told them to come, but they're not entirely sure what the point is and what they're supposed to gain from it. A smaller group arrives already understanding the value, while many others are simply trying to figure out how this fits into the overall process and what it's meant to do for them. They often walk in with a mix of stiffness, pain, and uncertainty, saying things like, "My surgeon said to see you before surgery, but I don't really know what it's for. It's not going to fix my knee." Once we begin talking, they start to understand that prehab isn't about fixing the arthritis. It's about strengthening their system, so the first phase after surgery doesn't feel like they're starting from nothing. Once we've talked through why they were referred and how this preparation fits in their overall plan, the conversation naturally shifts toward the part we work on together, the physical preparation. We build strength, mobility, movement control, walking mechanics, and balance in a way that supports the demands of surgery and the first steps afterward. This physical work offers a broad range of meaningful gains that help them approach the procedure with greater steadiness and capability. As part of those early conversations, education becomes just as important as the physical work. People want to know what the first few days will look like, how much they'd be expected to move, what pain might feel like, and how long it typically takes to get back on their feet. Walking them through the normal sequence, waking up, the first attempt to stand, how the walker comes into play, what swelling can and cannot tell them, gives them a clearer understanding of the road ahead. And hearing this ahead of time makes the early hospital information feel less overwhelming because they've already processed it once in a calmer setting. I also spend time preparing them for the physical therapy-related expectations in those early days. We talk about when the first PT session usually happens, how early mobility is guided, what the therapist will look for in terms of safety, strength, and movement quality, and what weight-bearing status is likely allowed, depending on the surgeon's protocol. This is usually weight-bearing as tolerated for total knee replacements. You'll be speaking with your surgeon about this, and I recommend you ask them what the expectation is before you go into surgery. Many people worry they won't be able to move their knee at all, so hearing ahead of time that early bending is usually limited but still possible and encouraged, that helps them walk in with more grounded expectations. We also outline the mobility pattern PT will walk them through in the first 1 to 3 days. standing with assistance, taking a few steps with the walker, learning safe turning mechanics, and practicing essential transitions like getting in and out of bed or a chair. Mapping this out before surgery makes those first movements feel more recognizable rather than abrupt. This preparation doesn't eliminate discomfort, and frankly, nothing does in the beginning stages, except for some pain medication, but it helps people feel steadier as they move through those initial steps. We then look at the kinds of functional tasks physical therapy will cover once they return home. We talk about how to approach stairs safely, including using the handrail, leading with the stronger leg when going up and with the surgical leg when going down, and controlling each step without rushing. We cover curbs, thresholds, and uneven surfaces, so they understand what to expect with the walker and then eventually the cane. Since car transfers worry many patients, I'll explain how to turn, scooch in, and position themselves in a way that keeps the knee safe. Education also includes expectations around pain during physical therapy. I explain that discomfort with early movement is normal, and that medication can help keep them comfortable. Knowing what to expect helps them participate without fear and reduces the hesitation that often shows up when beginning range of motion work. We review what typical swelling looks like, how much is expected, and when it signals the need to elevate, ice, or adjust activity. By the time surgery arrives, they'll usually have a clearer sense of the physical milestones ahead, walking with assistance, progressing to household distances, starting gentle motion work, and practicing the tasks that matter most in their home environment. This framework doesn't make the recovery effortless, but it gives them structure and familiarity, which goes a long way in the first weeks after surgery. One pattern that I commonly see after surgery is when patients return and they tell me that the first few days felt more manageable than they expected. What they usually describe is that the movements themselves felt more familiar when the therapist asked them to stand, shift their weight, or take a few steps. Because they had already practiced foundational movements before surgery, their body recognized the sequence, even though the context was new and certainly uncomfortable immediately following surgery. That familiarity makes a difference, especially in the early window when everything is happening quickly and can be quite painful. Preparing your body before surgery changes how you tolerate the physical stress of the procedure. When you go into surgery with stronger muscles, steadier balance, and better mobility, your body handles that stress more efficiently. You can initiate movement more easily afterward because your system isn't trying to climb out of a deeper hole. This reduces the sense of and the actual deconditioning that tends to build up during the waiting period and gives you a more reliable platform in the days immediately after the operation. The evidence behind prehab is clearest when we look at the early postoperative period. Multiple studies converge on the same pattern. People who complete structured prehabilitation enter surgery with better strength, mobility, and balance. And those advantages are most noticeable in the first several weeks after a knee replacement. In a 2022 systematic review and meta-analysis by Gränicher and colleagues, they examined prehab programs across several countries and found consistent improvements in knee function before surgery and in the first 2 to 3 months after surgery. These early gains tended to narrow by 6 to 12 months, which means prehab doesn't alter long-term outcomes dramatically, but that doesn't mean it's not very valuable. It meaningfully improves the phase when patients feel the most vulnerable. More recent work reinforces these early advantages. Large pathway-based studies, such as a 2023 study led by Minnick, demonstrated that patients who entered surgery with clearer expectations and stronger physical baselines progressed through their early milestones more efficiently. A 2023 analysis led by Kaplan added that patients with stronger preoperative mobility and function often required fewer outpatient visits and recovered early abilities faster, suggesting that baseline strength plays a measurable role. Research on activity and adherence also provides insight. A 2022 study by Duong and colleagues showed that patients who had higher baseline step counts before surgery or more likely to meet activity goals after their replacement. This aligns with what we see clinically. People who walk into surgery with a bit more capacity tend to walk out of it with momentum. Finally, studies on early postoperative dosing, like a 2021 study led by Dandis, highlight that people who have a foundation of strength and motor control tolerate early movement and progressive exercise more effectively. This doesn't mean prehab solves everything, but it supports the idea that a stronger, more coordinated system handles surgical stress more efficiently. Have I convinced you yet? Together, these findings form a clear picture. Prehab helps most in the early period when confidence, safety, and movement quality matter the most. So, prehab is most useful when someone has several weeks before surgery, enough discomfort or weakness to benefit from guided strengthening and movement practice, and enough energy and motivation to actually engage with the plan. People with significant strength loss, limited range of motion, balance issues, or a more sedentary lifestyle before surgery tend to see the clearest gains. Even when the improvements aren't dramatic, the sense of agency and familiarity with the movements gives people a physiological and psychological steadiness that really shows up. When I structure a prehab plan, I think about it as a progressive narrative rather than just a checklist. The beginning usually focuses on helping the patient reconnect with their quadriceps, glutes, hamstrings, and calf muscles. Yep, all those, all the way up and down the leg. Because many people have been guarding or moving differently for years. From there, we increase the load gradually while continuing to protect irritated joints. Once someone regains a little strength and control, we fold in balance work and gentle functional movements that they will need immediately after surgery. Layered throughout the process is education about the recovery timeline, pain expectations, walking patterns, swelling control, home environment preparation, and what the first 48 to 72 hours after surgery will realistically require. A 6-week prehab period usually has a predictable rhythm. The first 2 weeks emphasize mobility and gentle activation so the knee can move without unnecessary guarding. The middle weeks usually feel more productive because strength begins to build and people start noticing the difference when they climb stairs, stand from a chair, or walk across a parking lot. The final stretch focuses on consolidating strength and layering in the functional activities that will be necessary in the first days after surgery, such as practicing sit-to-stand transitions, stepping into the shower, or navigating around tight spaces in the home. These are the movements people often struggle with if they go into surgery without preparation. By working on them ahead of time, we reduce the cognitive load later, so they're not trying to learn a brand new skill while also managing pain, swelling, and fatigue. As those final weeks wrap up, the goal isn't to achieve perfection. It's to establish enough strength control and familiarity so the body isn't surprised by the basic demands of early recovery. I think prehab is about shifting the slope. Instead of starting from a weakened state with zero momentum, you begin surgery closer to level ground. A common question that comes up after prehab is what happens after surgery when it's time to start physical therapy again. Many people assume that they will automatically receive home care. While some do, particularly those with mobility limitations, medical complexities, or safety concerns, many others transition directly into outpatient physical therapy. Happens much more quickly now than it used to, maybe 20 years ago. We talk about the difference so people know exactly what to expect. Home-based physical therapy is generally short-term. It's focused on the essentials, safe transfers, initial walking, early knee motion, and basic functional tasks around the house. It's also focused on preventing post-surgical complications. Outpatient PT, on the other hand, initially is focused on preventing post-surgical complications, but it also offers a more progressive strengthening, gait training, balance work, and functional mobility tailored to their goals. Prehab helps people feel more prepared for either path. If they end up with home care first, that's fine. The movements are familiar. If they transition straight to outpatient PT, that's fine too. They arrive with a baseline that allows them to start at a higher level on day one. Before we wrap up, I want to mention something that often comes up during prehab. Along with strength, mobility, and balance work, we sometimes include brief functional testing just to get a baseline of how someone moves before surgery. And these tests help us understand steadiness, reaction time, and overall safety. If you've ever been in PT for your knee before, you may have heard of some of them. In the next episode, episode 23, we're going to shift directly into balance and functional tests. We'll start with two of the most widely used ones, the Berg Balance Scale and the Timed Up and Go, often called the TUG. You may recognize these from previous therapy experiences. They're straightforward, practical tools that give us a clear picture of how someone's functioning, before and after surgery. They fit naturally after today's discussion on Prehab because they help quantify the readiness we've been talking about. Then in episode 24, we'll continue the conversation by moving into other functional tests, such as the 30-second chair stand or the 5-time sit-to-stand, and probably the dynamic gait index. Those look at strength, endurance, speed of movement, and how someone handles some more dynamic tasks. But we'll save those for episode 24. If you want more resources on preparing for surgery, visit TotalKneeSuccess.com, where you can access additional educational content designed to support your preparation. I'm Michelle Lacerdo, and that concludes episode 22 of the Total Knee Success Podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes only. Discover more at TotalKneeSuccess.com, and be sure to subscribe and share, because every step forward takes you closer to living the life you love.